All right, everyone. All right. Hello. Good Tuesday evening, everybody. Welcome to the Music EdQuity Chat Show. This is a show for music educators to go beyond the surface to have deeper conversations about how we can reimagine music education to be diverse, inclusive, and culturally responsive for all of our students. My name is Ashley Cuthbertson, and I'm your host of the Music EdQuity Chat Show. I'm a music educator and the founder and CEO of Cuthbertson Consulting. We're an educational consulting firm that specializes in helping music educators to center equitable and culturally responsive practices in their music curriculum and instruction so that they can build and maintain high quality music programs where all of their students are thriving. The Music EdQuity Chat is live, just like we are today, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. And you can also follow me on all of your favorite social media channels. You can find my handles and links on my website, www.ashleycuthbertson.com. All right, let's get into it. I am so excited for our conversation this evening about recruiting and retaining music educators of color with my very special guest. In fact, my first guest here on the Music EdQuity Chat Show, Angelica Brooks. Let me grab Angelina. Welcome. There she is. Welcome, Angelina. And thank you again so much for being here tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yay. Awesome. All right. So I am so pleased for our audience to get to hear a little bit of this conversation. I feel like this is something that is kind of talked about at like the surface level, but I'm really excited to really get into it deeper tonight. So I thought we would kick it off with Angelina, you just introducing yourself and telling the people a little bit about the work that you're doing.
Sure. So I am Angelica Brooks. I am a third-year DMA student at the University of Southern California, majoring in music teaching and learning. And my academic focus is leading instructional change with the School of Education in their educational leadership program. I have 13 years of experience as a public school educator. I taught elementary and middle and high school music, choral music. Also taught AP theory, and I also taught a multitude of populations from CRI to honors classes. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And I think also super exciting, you were the teacher of the year for your school district in 2019.
I was. Yes, I was. Go PGCPS.
Yay, shout out to Prince George's teachers. Awesome. All right. So we know that we have an equity problem in music education, and it's not a new thing. And there are folks who are working to address the issues that exist both at like the higher systemic level, but also the more local level, like, outdated, unculturally responsive curricula that schools are using, inequitable teaching practices and things like that. And, I could go on, right? But one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is the just lack of diversity that we have in our music teacher workforce. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit with you about what led you to becoming so passionate about recruiting and retaining music educators of color.
Awesome. So I actually started my journey toward my doctorate during the pandemic in the fall of 2020. And I came across an article called Push to Teach, Pedagogies and Policies for a Black Women Educator Pipeline. This was by Gist White and Bianco in 2018. Now I'm going to read for you just the very first sentence of this article, okay?
Yes.
It says this research study examines the learning experiences of 11th and 12th grade Black girls participating in a pre-collegiate program committed to increasing the number of teachers of color entering the profession by viewing a teaching career as an act of social justice to educational equity.
Yes.
I was hooked, honey. I was hooked from then on.
Yes.
And that was the first sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
I was like, I mean, all senses went, yes.
And the fact that it names Black women specifically, I think that's important. That's an important part to not miss of what you just said.
I mean, it was literally Black girl magic in academic linguistics,
Yes.
if you will, in academic language.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, yes, this is for me. That resonated with me. So what they did is over a 5-year period, they basically took some tenets, of course, from critical race theory and Black feminist theory, and they found some key findings that helped them to better understand ways to amplify the collective learning and social emotional experiences of Black girls in the program. They learned how to highlight and critique the challenges and possibilities for positively pushing Black girls' intellectual identities, not just as students, but as future teachers.
Yeah.
Via the pedagogies and the supports in these theories. They
Yeah.
also looked at ways to identify spaces and structures in schools that can resist and combat the marginalization of Black girls for their agency and genius.
Yes. The
Okay.
agency. Yes. Yes.
And, yes. And to consider the implications for the development of a actual Black woman educator pipeline.
Okay.
Right. And that
Yeah.
resonated with me so much because I feel that we don't see enough of that.
No.
We don't see enough of Black educators, particularly in music education, but also seeing us be intentional about setting teachers up for success.
Yes.
Particularly music teachers. And I think because music is so performance heavy, some people see being a music educator as the fallback career.
Yeah.
And it's not, right? For many of us that are educators, what it is that we're so good at what we do that we are able to synthesize and break down that information and differentiate it in ways that multiple learners can understand it.
Yes.
And then walk away and make meaning of their own so that they can then go on to become even better than us.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
That's a calling.
Yes, it is a calling. It is a talent. And I think it's interesting because I feel that a lot of people in and out of education do see it as a fallback. Like if you can't make it as a performer, you wind up as a music teacher. But I think what's important about what you just said is the skill of educating, the arts of teaching is not something that just like happenstancely happens, that you just wake up in the morning and you're able to do. There's a real pedagogy behind how we teach. And this is actually what I work with music educators on, to be able to skillfully implement culturally responsive pedagogical practices into their curriculum and instruction, because some of the old traditional ways that we were taught, right, of how we learned in school in and out of music education wasn't really all that pedagogically sound. Like it didn't increase our ability to make good decisions. It didn't increase our agency, right? I think it's so interesting that people say that the education part is the fallback, because I actually was originally a performance major. That's originally what I thought I was going to do. And I became a teacher because I love the puzzle of like figuring out with kids. I did some teaching when I was in college, just part-time at a middle school. And I love the puzzle of figuring out like why certain things work certain ways with some kids, but like not other. Like I love that puzzling piece. But also just the impact of when I really figured out like how to move with kids in the way that they needed me to move teaching wise. Like that was a whole, I mean, that's not something that you just fall back on, right? That's the art of teaching. And I think more people need to understand that, right? Because I think in some, no shade to performers, but I think in many ways, being a teacher requires a different level of emotional awareness, a different level of social emotional ability than being a performer on a stage will afford you. And so I think, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that article. I'm gonna have to make sure I write that down.
And a level of genius, because you have to think quick on your feet. You may, and this goes back to, even though you may have your lesson plan like well thought out, I know exactly where I'm gonna go, this is my roadmap. Many of us know in the middle of that lesson, something will not go as planned. And you need to quickly readjust. It is just like if you were performing. We all call it turning it on, for our students, right? And then
Yeah.
you have to improvise. You have to readjust. You have to say, okay, let me go back. Let me try that differently, because the way I thought this was going to go isn't the way it's going. Let me rethink that. Let me see, perhaps if I pose it like this, or perhaps if I make this analogy, or hey, everyone, try this activity with you. That takes a certain level of genius.
It does. Yeah. That's the art and craft of teaching, to be able in the moment to change gears and to make on-course corrections right in the moment, right? It's not going to be written in your lesson plan, but be able to be so skillful because you understand the design, right? That you can make those pivots and be able to change. Yeah, I love that. Yes. All right. So I think in general, and this is kind of what my aim is with this show, is to get past this like surface discussions, right? So I think a lot of us talk about like the symptoms of bigger problems, but we really rarely talk about the actual root cause of the problem itself. So I would love to, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as far as when it comes to recruiting and retaining music teachers of color. Both, what do you think are some of the symptoms that we're seeing out in the education system, but also what do you think like the real root cause of that problem is?
Ooh, honey, I wish we had more than an hour.
Let's
Because
do it.
there's so many things, like because it's a systemic thing, right? So we could talk about the imbalance in racial equity as far as the teacher workforce, going even back before Brown versus Board of Education, and how many teachers of color, particularly African American teachers, were fired, could not work at their local white schools, despite their education and their background, or the ones that were hired were very much marginalized in those settings, right? So we can go all the way back there, but let's make it a little even more current, right? Because this issue of there being a lack of diversity in America's education workforce is not something new, right? And there have been many states that have been trying to work towards educational equity through teacher diversity by trying to recruit and hire more teachers of color. However, this is not an issue that you can recruit your way out of, right? Because if those teachers are not staying within the first 5 years, then you're back at square one. You're not retaining them, right? Which also says something about the culture of education. I mean, we can talk about burnout. We can talk about, especially for music education, there are many teachers that have to fight to even have a program in their building. We can talk about how when budget cuts are made, many times the arts are the first courses to be cut. You know, there's so many systemic things. And so in this particular issue of educators of color and music education, you're dealing with two entities that are already marginalized, music education and educators of color. And then you put them together and we have an even smaller subset, clawing and fighting for a chance to exist, to be supported, to be validated, right? And so there are so many different layers to this. And I don't know, there's not just one root cause, but there are like many symptoms, right? Because like I said before, this is not an issue, again, that you can just hire your way out of, right? Like, let's take, for example, the 2021 State of the U.S. Teacher Survey done by the RAND Corporation, right? Nearly half of Black teachers reported that in the winter of 2021, they were going to be leaving the profession at the end of the school year, which would have been 2022. Okay. Now, mind you, this is compared to 23% of teachers overall, which is concerning because there's already a workforce diversity issue. And then nearly half of your Black teachers are like, yeah, I'm not coming back.
I'm out. I'm out.
Right. So then this is crucial for school leaders to examine, for district leaders to examine and address,
Yeah.
And even though we all know that right now there is a nationwide shortage of teachers, I mean, honestly, civil servants across
Yeah. All
all
sectors.
industries.
Yeah.
Yes, but particularly in education, this is not a time to look at it as a deficit. If anything, this is a time to capitalize on the fact that we have all these vacancies. Now is the perfect time to revisit and reimagine how we recruit and retain educators of color.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a clean slate, a drawing board. Here's our opportunity to do something different.
Yeah. And I almost see it as kind of like almost a catch-22, right? So I see one of the this kind of bigger systemic issues as far as recruiting, but also maybe really even in the retaining of teachers of color. The problem is nobody wants to be the only one, right? Nobody wants to be the only person. Nobody wants to be the lone. And I've been the lone Black woman, right? Like nobody wants to do that. And so when people are looking for jobs and they're looking for schools, school districts to go and serve at, I think because we're struggling to retain teachers of color and music teachers of color in our music programs and our school district music teams, I think when people are looking for like where they want to go, like the first place you want to look is not a place where you know already that it's not going to be a lot of people that look like you. Because I know from one, a teacher I worked with made a really good point. And I think this is other, thoughts I've had also, but when you see like, there's not a whole lot of like Black folks over there, you wonder, well, what's going on that like, nobody's wanting to go over there and it's looking one certain way, right? It kind of, there's always an undergirding issue, right? Like, are there going to be some racial tensions? Are there some reasons why there aren't more representation, right? And so I think it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because we're struggling to retain people when people are out looking for jobs and where they want to serve, it's hard to recruit when they're going to have to be the only one. Because I think we all know, especially those of us Black and brown folks, we know when we're going to a place and we're the only one, we're going to have stuff to deal with, right? Things are going to come up regardless of what we are hoping it's going to come up or what it's going to be. There's always something. There's always something. And I see, and by the way, hey, I see that there's lots of people watching us. So hey, folks on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And hey, Wendy, I see your comment in Facebook. Wendy's a teacher, friend of mine in Manassas. Wendy's asking, what about just getting people of color into an education program? As a Latina, I remember my college years, there was only one Latino in our music ed program, and he ended up not even going into education. And I think, as you just said, Angelica, I think that there's like so many symptoms and so many things happening. Hey, Liz, hey. I think that's one of the things, right? When we look at our teacher education programs, like that pipeline that you were just saying, Angelica, when the pipeline is not flowing like a water faucet on full blast, it's kind of like dripping. I think that's also part of the problem as well.
I'm gonna go back to the comment you made about being the only person in the environment, right? Yeah. Now, we may not know why that is, right? However, the data states that the diversity amongst students in public schools nationwide is increasing every year.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So the students that we are serving are diverse, right? Yeah. And even if you may be the only representative in that school building or, in that particular program, be the one, right? Yeah. Be the person to stand in the gap, be the representation for students so they can see what educational authority looks like in other shades, in other cultures, with other lived experiences. That's very important. Like, it doesn't matter if, the staff is doing something else. Focus on the students. Focus on the students that you would be serving, right? Yeah. Will the students of this school, of this community, of this district be better with me in it? And if you think that you could be the change, you could be that person, then I say by all means, do it. Yeah, absolutely. And then back to your second subject about academic retention. because that is a real issue as well. I sit on some education boards with some other organizations, and one of the biggest issues right now is retaining music education students in undergraduate programs.
Yeah.
We're seeing that music education students of color are not staying through the program. And there are other issues that come up with that as well, especially in music education. Can you imagine getting a 4-year degree or working towards a 4-year degree to become a music teacher, and then you can't pass praxis, so you can't get a license?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think not enough people are talking about that, because I think there are undergraduate teacher candidates of color, but I think exactly what you said, there's that like gatekeeping issue of the tests that I think keep a lot of Black and brown teachers from pre-service teachers from being able to actually be in service with us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, another thing that needs to be examined are how are institutions supporting their music education students of color while they're in school and once they graduate?
Yeah.
Are you keeping in touch? Do they have a mentor? While they're in school, are they getting praxis training? Are they getting any scholarship funds? Are they able to do any other things or earns any other monies to help towards their degree program? Like how are we supporting them?
Yeah. And I know this is not one of the questions I was going to, but this is making me think as we're, just having this conversation. So Angelica, she and I connected because we both served as adjunct professors at the University of Maryland, Baltimore College. Shout out to our UMBC folks. I see Liz is on here. Hey, what's up, Liz? And so I love that last point you made about what are we doing to support folks in their pre-service time in the university level, but also out of. I would love to talk a little bit about through the courses that you're teaching, and also I guess the courses I'm teaching as well. But what are some supports that you are you seeing some supports at the university level for students as we're trying to move them towards that service, being in service teachers? I'm wondering what you're seeing in your classes.
Well, one thing I like that UMBC does is that they have their candidates do student teaching for more than one semester.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason why that's important, some people may say, well, that's too long. No, because it's not just about learning how to deliver the content. You have to learn how to develop relationships with students.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You have to learn how to move past judging a student by what you initially see.
Yes.
Right? Because children are products of their environment. And sometimes what you see is not what you think you see.
Yep.
Right? And learning how to develop relationships is a skill that even some adults have trouble with. There are many adults that don't have friends because, or maybe have one or two friends and just a lot of associates, right? Because the ability to be vulnerable enough to share with someone, some things that you may be sensitive about or you may find intimate about yourself. Imagine being a child and having to share with someone, hey, these are some struggles I'm having in my learning. These are some struggles I'm having at home. These are some struggles I'm having in my school community. Right? And not to mention, on top of that, many students of color, when they're having trouble in the classroom, don't ask questions, don't speak up. Just try to figure out, I'm just going to try to figure this out because I don't want to look dumb. I don't want to look like I don't know.
Right.
Right? Who told us we can't ask questions? Who told us we can't inquire?
Yeah.
Exactly, because we've been conditioned to think that there's something wrong with looking like I don't know.
Right. Or it comes out of students kind of behaving in a different way because they're trying to cover up that they don't know. They don't want to look foolish, in front of their peers or their teachers.
Exactly. When that is the exact key to gaining knowledge.
Right. Yes. Yes, yes. I love that UMBC has their pre-service teacher serve in different places. I think another part of that, and I love what you said about learning how to have relationships, because not all adults even figure that out, I think. But I think also the ability to see beyond your own frame of reference, right? I talk with my
Yeah.
teachers a lot about you have to be able to think expansively. And in order to think expansively, you have to be around some different folks and in some different situations. You have to have a variety of experiences. And you can't get that from but just being in one school. And I think that even transcends teachers of, I know we're talking about teachers of color especially, but I think that transcends race, ability, and I think that transcends everything, the ability to think expansively past just your own frame of reference, so that you can make space for thinking about, well, maybe this student is acting out. I say acting out with quotes, if you can't see me, because they are uncomfortable with what I'm asking them to do, because this is something that they've never experienced before. And we don't have the relationship yet for me to be able to kind of push them into wanting to explore that. I think only having one student teaching experience, they're not going to be able to learn how to move, in the agile way that teachers need to be able to do every day to be able to really support kids, but think outside of yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
also, too, understanding that you are not bound to the way you were taught.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to uphold certain practices that, when you were a music student, made you feel embarrassed, made you feel ashamed. You don't have to pass on those traditions to the next generation. You
Yeah.
can do something better. There are
Yeah.
plenty of strategies, research,
Yeah.
practiced strategies that can allow you to be a better educator than what you received. And Lord
Exactly.
knows today's students deserve that. I
Yeah.
mean, they've been through the whole pandemic. They're going through racial, social, economical injustices. Like,
Yeah.
if this is a time where students needed anybody, especially educators, they need us more now than ever.
They do. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So then I think that takes me to my next thought. So let's talk a little bit about, so if we were to not address this issue of diversifying our music teaching force, so having more teachers, music teachers of color, what do you imagine will continue to be the issues that we're seeing, both amongst like teachers, but also amongst our kids in our music programs?
Well, one would, of course, be the huge number of vacancies, because, you know, yeah,
People
that's
don't want to teach. Yeah.
if we don't address this, who, how we, okay. I
Mm,
mean, point blank, period.
yeah.
The profession needs to grow,
Yeah.
needs to fill these vacancies. And the reason too why this is so important for the arts is because, again, if there's a missing math teacher or a bad math teacher at a school, they're not going to cut the whole math department. They're going to
Mm,
recruit a math teacher and put them in their place. Whereas for some schools, if there's no music teacher, there's no music.
yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the stakes are a little higher
Yes.
for the arts, particularly music, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but anyway, and despite the fact that the writing has been on the wall regarding the increasing uh, teacher shortages throughout the country,
Yeah.
um, the thing that people aren't realizing is that, one, not only are we losing educators of color, but we're also letting down the students of color that rely on them,
Yes. Yes.
because
Yeah.
that's a real thing too. Yeah.
Yeah.
um we it's not just about having, representation in the classroom, but for many students of color, this is about having an ally, having
Yeah.
a cultural ambassador, having someone who gets you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or you can have that connection with, or have that representation or role model, if you
Yeah.
will, in your own school or your own community, your own, this is so much bigger than, just filling a vacancy. but also pouring into the next generation of educators, particularly music educators.
Yeah. And I think that representation piece, on your point, further matters, because if you've never seen somebody who looks like you doing the thing, it becomes a lot harder for you to imagine you doing that thing, right? So if you've never had a music teacher of color to kind of be that ally, that example, it's going to be harder for you to even imagine what it could be like for you to be in that role, right? And I think that then plays back into how do we even recruit people if they've never had an example of seeing something reflected back at them in the form of their teacher. And I think that even the other point you made about when there's no music teacher, that vacancy, it gets a lot easier for people just to cut music, period. And I think we all have seen once music and arts programs go off, right, once it gets cut, the way to get them back is so much harder. The fight to reinstate a music program once it's been cut for whatever reason, like you said, a math teacher could have a vacancy. They're going to find someone to fill math. They don't cut the whole math department, right? But in music, that happens quite frequently. And then the ability to get that music program back is so much harder, unfortunately, because the decision makers have now operated in a way that they've seen that our school functioned with no music teacher, right? So they don't see the value of having music there because they didn't see it, right? And I think it has become so much harder for us to be able to even have a program at all. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And so I know we talked a little bit about the numbers before, and I've heard you talk before about it's just bigger than the numbers, right? We know that a little over 50% of our students in U.S. schools are Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, students of color. Our teaching force doesn't quite, reflect that back to them. I think in music education, something like 90% of music educators are not teachers of color. And so I love to do a little dreaming.
2.3, honey.
Yeah.
2.3% of music educators in public schools are white, non-Hispanic.
Yeah, that's a big number, right? That's a big number. Yeah. And so I love to do a little bit of like dreaming, like what do we hope for the future of music education as far as what it pertains to recruiting and retaining our music educators of color. I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I wonder like what would the benefits be? What are the beautiful dreams that would come out of having more teachers that reflect the diversity of our student force that we have? What are your dreams about what it could look like? Yeah.
Well, having a racially diverse workforce, of course, is a benefit, and teaching especially, because teachers of color can provide culturally relevant teaching and better understand the situations that students of color may face. And they help develop, of course, student-teacher relationships, which of course helps with attrition and attendance engagement. And seeing how students of color now make up, of course, more than half of the U.S. student population, teachers of color serve as cultural ambassadors to help students feel welcome. They serve as role models, and they normalize all students, not just students of color, but also students that are not of color, normalizing seeing people of color in positions of authority in educational settings, right? Yeah. Students of all racial backgrounds can benefit from a diverse teacher workforce that represents the nation's overall demographic, right? And this is imperative because, as it was recently, been reminded of us in the news, that nearly 40% of U.S. schools have not a single teacher of color on staff.
Yeah, that was recent, pretty recent. Yeah, I saw that recently too.
Yes, right?
And how crazy is that? That's so crazy. That's so crazy, 40%.
But as a result, there are students and teachers in the schools that miss opportunities to question assumptions about race, about class, about privilege that they might encounter in their communities, and miss opportunities to break down stereotypes about people of color. you know, and mind you, is not the responsibility of teachers of color to like facilitate conversations about race and disprove assumptions. However, greater diversity within the teacher profession supports the overall effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think when I dream about what a future in education, a future in music education would look like, if we have more representation, there's more reflective across what our students are looking like, our teachers are looking like. I think I see students who grew up to be adults who have had the variety of experiences with a variety of people who have a variety of backgrounds, that they don't jump to assumptions and stereotypes right away. I think we see literally in the news examples of this every single day. I think of, the gross violence that happens. We don't have to go into all that, but I see all of these opportunities where I think of, if that person, I wonder, what if that person had had the experience in their K-12 education, just in their life, in their, growing up, maybe not necessarily their in-school experiences, but I believe education is everywhere. We're always learning, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be in school. What if that person had had the opportunity, the experience to be in community with folks that were different from them? Would they have still made those same assumptions? Would they have gone down that same path, made those decisions? I think people underestimate the importance of diversity. And I think part of that is because the word diversity has become very like buzzwordy. And I think people have forgotten, it's just like with other buzzwords, right? Differentiation was a big buzzword for a long time, and we like lost the essence and the actual, like, what is that? And I think with diversity, I think what gets lost in the sauce is that folks don't understand that in order for us to be able to live and thrive in this global society, I mean, you're in California right now, I'm in Virginia, we're having a conversation. We are all connected, right? And I think when we forget that diversity is about having those experiences with people who are just different from us, not better or worse, I think we're just really missing out on opportunities to be able to live in a more compassionate, empathetic, and really more well-informed way. And I think even in our music classrooms, we can be fostering this. But I think it starts, like you said, in that pipeline of, do we even have teachers of color being fed into our education system? And I think the longer we wait to like solve some of these problems, the more, we're already kind of at a flashpoint, I think now, right? I think even before 2020, this like kind of bubbling up of racial issues they've been happening, right? For decades and hundreds of years. But I think right now, especially with the overturning of education because of the pandemic and all the disruptions that we've experienced, I think right now is still a really ripe time for us to kind of start to right this huge ship that is our educational system, even within our music programs. And so when I kind of dream about like what would the future be like, I just imagine more compassionate, empathetic people, and because they've had these diverse experiences, they make different choices. And I think we undervalue the bigger impacts that just having I don't know if you've seen this on like Twitter. I see every once in a while somebody will put a tweet up. It's always the exact same tweet, different people trying to get those likes, right? It's always like, when was the first time you had a teacher of color? And I'm always so shocked that people literally are out here never having had a teacher of color, like never. And I'm just like, first of all, where do you live that's happening, right? And I'm also wondering, like, what are the bigger kind of implications to our society when so many people you said 40%, right? When so many people still are not having teachers that represent a variety of diverse backgrounds, right? I think that's so wild to me that's still a thing that's happening. Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I grew up in the DC area, the DMV, as it's affectionately called.
Yeah.
So most of my teachers, my entire like academic career from kindergarten, through undergrad, were predominantly African American. And I didn't think much of it until you're put into a setting where you really are a minority. And you're like, oh, it's quite, oh, okay, all right. It's different, right? Because then you start to question yourself, your background, am I good enough? Like,
right.
Imagine feeling that like your whole academic career.
Yeah. That was me. Did you grow up in PG County?
I did.
You did? Yeah. And I grew up in Loudoun, and Loudoun is also pretty diverse, but also not. And so a lot of my K-12 experience, even though I had diverse teachers, so I don't know if in elementary school, no, I did. I've had teachers of color all throughout. Yep. Even my music teachers, I've had Black music teachers. I've kind of all everybody, right? But even in my K-12 experience, a lot of the time, my Black and brown teachers were like maybe one teacher that year I had, or maybe two teachers out of like 5 or 6. And here in Loudoun, depending upon where you are, again, community, it's interesting, different communities. A lot of times I was the only one. Yeah.
Even when I entered the workforce, I used to, work at a law firm. I used to work at Fox, and in some of those situations, I was the only person of color, and it's a lot of pressure. No one says, this is your job is to wear the reputation of your entire race on your back with everything you do. So don't even sneeze wrong, or else everybody's going to assume that that's the way Black people sneeze, and you've let your whole race down.
So much.
But in settings where there's not a lot of representation, you do carry that pressure. Yeah. And I can't imagine what it's like for a child to feel that way, who is, who's already dealing with the normal organic developmental issues that come with, getting older, moving from, being a child to an adolescent to a young adult. But then doing that in an environment where everything you do is scrutinized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I also love too what you said earlier about about our educational settings being a place where we get to talk, because that's one of the things I do talk to my students at UMBC about. The course in my program management and design course at UMBC, we talk about designing your school year, how to manage it, basically, kind of like a business, but also being intentional about the decisions you make as a leader, And one of the things that I talk to my students about is how the educational setting is one of the only places, school is one of the only places where students will find people who are not like them, where they will be in a setting where they actually have the opportunity to practice being civil.
Yeah.
Right? Because social media is not civil.
No, not even a little bit. Nope.
Sometimes in their homes, they don't have the opportunity to say what they think or how they feel, depending on their upbringing. Our classrooms are special places, right? Where students get a one-of-a-kind opportunity, not only to engage with our content, music.
Yes.
One of the contents in the world. But they also have the opportunity to learn how to respect others' opinions, how to learn about other people's cultures,
right?
How to make connections. This is serious life-changing skills that we get to bring to our students, and we get to do it through our contents, particularly music.
Yes. Yes, music is so much more than just the notes on the page, right? All these literal life skills that we're teaching through this beautiful content area that we have, music, will serve our students down the road, right? And I always tell the teachers that I work with, like, really interrogate, what is the reason why you're teaching that thing? Is that thing music, right? The thing that you're teaching with the music, is your objective connected to the standards, but is it also connected to relevance in that child's life? Because if what you're doing is only going to serve them in the 4 walls of your classroom, what was actually the point of them learning that thing? How are they learning the skills that they're going to do when they go out? That's what we need kids to be ready to do, to go out in the world and be citizens of our global society that can be able to make connections and relationships with folks and see other people's points of view and respectfully disagree, right? That's what we need our kids to be able to go out there and to be able to do. And how fortunate are we that we can do this through music?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important that, like you said before, the time to have the conversation has passed, honey.
Yes.
It is time to be intentional. It is time to stop being complacent. It is time to, for real, put in some actionable items like job fairs for teachers of color.
Yes.
Right? Having purposeful praxis training.
Yeah.
Right? Having purposeful fellowships like the teacher pipeline I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Like taking 11th and 12th grade students of color in music. Have you considered a career in education?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to be honest. I used to be one of those educators who, if a student in my high school was like, I want to be a teacher like you, or I want to go into education, I used to be like, you don't do that.
No, you didn't.
Oh, that didn't stop them. They still went on to major in music education. Thank God.
I love it.
Thank God they didn't listen to me.
Yeah, they're like, we're going to let her stop us.
And I think it's because they knew that despite my joking comment, they knew they could see the joy. I really do love what I do.
Yeah.
And I guess they too were moved by being in my classroom. So I thank God that they still was like, I have students now who are like juniors and seniors in their music education programs, and I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. But being intentional about looking for talented music educators, even as young as like middle school and high school.
Yeah.
Supporting them through their journey, reaching out via email even after they graduate. Hey, how's the program going? Do you have any questions? What classes are you taking now? Where are you doing your student teaching? Institutions being intentional about sending their students to diverse schools within their district to do their student teaching. Yes. Because some people, and this also has to do with retention, right? Because there are students who do their student teaching in utopian schools. And then they get into the real world and say, this is nothing like the experience I had when I was in undergrad. I feel woefully unprepared. Maybe this is not for me.
Right.
And that ain't right.
No.
I mean, if you give me a slice of German chocolate cake and I taste it for the first time, every time I have German chocolate cake, I'm expecting it to taste like that.
Exactly.
Not like tomato soup, not like creme brulee. I'm expecting it to taste like the German chocolate cake I had in the first time, which is why it's important that your student teaching really is reflective of what you may be getting once you actually enter the workforce. Right?
Yeah.
And how about partnerships between school districts and universities?
Yes, yes.
Where you're actually tracking the progress of your education majors and your music education majors so that once they graduate, they got their license, we have a job for you. And with all these vacancies, you absolutely have a job for them.
Yeah, we do. Yep. Yes. Yep. Okay. I love that.
And also having robust HR frameworks, right? Policies in place set up by school districts and school boards that are committed to diversifying the workforce and retaining talented educators.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because for this work that we say we want to do in music education of being more diverse and being more equitable, we know that, of course, it starts with who's in front of the room, but it also will be continued by who stays in the field, right? Because as you stay in the field, this is when you get opportunities to write curriculum. This is when you get opportunities to mentor other teachers. This is how you move up the ranks and see yourself in positions of leadership where you can make an impact in the field.
Yes.
but we can't do that if people are leaving within the first 5 years.
Right. Yes. I love that. I love that you, and if those of you who are listening, I hope you were taking notes, because Angelica literally just gave us the framework for what we need to do to get our pipeline full of music educators of color. And I love what you said, Angelica. It's not about not just reaching out, making sure that we're being intentional about kids who are in middle school, high school. How are we encouraging them? But also, how are we reaching back to them when they're in their university programs? How are we reaching back to them when they're in those first 5 years? Those first 5 years are hard, right? But we know from the data that once you make it past those 5 years, like, the numbers exponentially go up for how much longer you're going to stay, right? So I love that you pointed out both, like, before, when they're in pre-service, and then also after, right? So how do we keep our pipeline full? And then how do we retain folks once they're in the field? Because I think, as we think about, like, what are the systemic things that need to be changed, right? We have to look at HR, as you just said. We have to look at the people who are writing the curriculum, right? Those folks are the ones who shape our education system. And if we're always losing our best and brightest music educators of color in their first 5 years, they never have the opportunity to move into leadership, to be able to leave their fingerprints on the curriculum, on the music programs, to make it, to leave it better for the kids of color that are looking to them, right? So if you were taking notes, I mean, you just gave us the blueprint. You just told us what we need to do. So we have our marching orders, folks. Like, this is what we need to get down to. I love it. I love it. Awesome. I love that you gave us clear solutions. Again, that's what I want to talk about, right? I think there's so much talk about how we want to have a diverse teacher workforce. So many school districts, especially after 2020, right, have these priorities, and one of them is a diverse workforce. But I wonder, like, and I know things are happening behind the scenes. We don't always see what's going on, right? But I still wonder, when I still look back, I look back now, we're almost 3 full years after some of these big grand statements, what real change has actually happened? What did you actually do after you made that statement? Did you actually put some action into it? And Angelica just told us what we need to get down to. So let's get to it. We have our marching orders. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And there are some organizations who have started to do this work, right? Yeah. And if those that don't know, you can attend my conference coming up in March called the Table.
Tell us more about that conference. Yes.
So I started a nonprofit organization called the Table Music Education Music Education Corporation, and it is dedicated to addressing the recruitment and retention of music educators of color as an act of social justice. And in this first conference, it is specifically to answer that question. I want to do the work, but I don't know how. So for this first conference, I brought together a lot of people in the field who are currently working toward this effort. And they're going to be sharing with us what they're doing. We're talking about school board members. We're talking about music education professors. We're talking music supervisors, the people who train, hire, and mentor music educators. We're talking about organizations like Sphinx and the Cleveland Institute of Music, who did their Future of Music Faculty Fellowship, which I was a part of, their inaugural class. They started up this fellowship because they saw there was a lack of diversity in academia, particularly in music faculty of color. So they started this fellowship where music faculty of color could be mentored by tenured music faculty of color from around the nation. And it was so great to have them look over our CV, do mock interviews, but it was very intentional, right? Like, we want to see you in this space in the future. I'm going to intentionally reach back, mentor you, and tell you how to get there. Yeah. And this is the type of intentional work that a lot of us need to be engaged in. So if you're looking to find out more about programs like this, I suggest you go over to www.thetablemec.com and register today. The conference is March 10th through 12th, and it is available in person and virtually. And registration is pay what you can, which goes from free to full price. Nice. Now, when I first did this, of course, people were like, now, why'd you do that? Because ain't nobody going to pay. And I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I can't see how a conference that is committed to breaking down barriers being a barrier.
Yeah.
So I took away all of that. Like, you can't come, fine, join virtually. I can't pay the registration fee, no problem. Click the free option and register. What matters is that your face is in the place and that your voice is at the table.
I love that. I love that. I love the intentionality of putting it together in a way where there's no excuse, right? There's no excuse to say, well, I couldn't get there. I couldn't afford it. There's no excuse. You have removed all the obstacles and barriers. I love the intentionality of that. Awesome. All
And
right. Well,
even
as we kind of
more,
wrap
like,
up, Angelica, first of all, thank you so much. This was amazing. I mean, we really could have gone on, I think, for like another couple of hours, but I know we better start wrapping it up. So you shared about your conference coming up. I'm going to make sure that I put the link. I think the link already might be in the description, but I'll make sure I double check that so that's there. So folks who are listening in all the places, the link should be right in the description, but I'll make sure that that's there. But do you have anything else coming up? Tell us more about what you're working on. I know you're working on your doctorate still out at USC. Anything else that you have going on that you want to share with the people?
Just really the conference. And oh yes, and I'm also working on a grounded theory study on the process of retention for music educators of color in the K-12 setting. How do we get from I think I'm about to quit to 10 years later, 12 years later, 20 years later? What is that process? Yeah. So I'm working on that, and I'll let you know when it's complete, and hopefully we'll see it in
Yes.
somebody's journal real soon.
Yes, we are going to see it in some journals. I can't wait to read that. And I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Angelica, and listeners who are out there. Thank you so much for listening in. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you are getting the updates whenever our episodes are coming out. We do film live as we are right now every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also follow me and also Angelica. Her handles are also in the description on your favorite social media platform. And most importantly, we want to get this message out to as many music educators as we can. So we're having deeper discussions about how we can reimagine and dream for a better music ed future. So if you know a music educator that needs to hear this message that Angelica and I had tonight, please make sure that you share this with them. The best way to keep up with me, the work that I'm doing to support music education, is really to be on my email list. So I'll make sure that you head over to my website, ashleycuthbertson.com. I do send out a weekly notes newsletter every Friday morning. And I also send out new blog posts that I'm writing. And also when I have new episodes of the Music Equity Chat Show. So make sure that you head over to my website so that you can stay in the know and keep on top of all of these great resources and great people like Angelica that I'm hoping to be able to amplify their message through my platform as well. So thank you again, everybody out there, Angelica, for listening. And I will see you next time on the Music Equity Chat Show. All right.